Hi, everybody. We're going to go over the foundations of government and law when it comes to forms of government. And we're going to look at the foundational parts of it right now. And then we'll transition to the other forms of government, such as democracies and monarchies. And so there are four characteristics of a state that we're going to cover. So the first one that we look at is the people. And so a government must have people for it to rule. Now, within this, it doesn't matter if it's big or small, as long as you have a certain group of people. Now, people who make up the state may or may not be homogeneous, which means that they share the same values, the same customs, some languages, the ethnic backgrounds. Look at the United States. We don't share the same customs and language with each other. There is the English language, but we also have to look at Hispanic cultures where they speak Spanish, or Arabic cultures that speak Arabic. And there's different backgrounds that they're there because of where people have come from. And so we look at a country. San Marino has 33,203 people. So China has 1.3 billion people. With the United States, we're only up to millions of people, 300 and some million people in our country. And so the next characteristics is territory. So the area that they exist must have land with known and recognized boundaries. Also, we can look at these territories as in scope. I mean, how big they are. We can look at the Vatican City, for instance. It's only 0.2 square miles. And the funny thing is that it's inside of Italy. So it's a country within inside another country. And then we have Russia that has over 6.6 million square miles. Then we have sovereignty, so the basic ruling culture of that country. And so it's either supreme and absolute power within its own territory. It can decide its own foreign and domestic policies, meaning that there is some kind of rule in how they're going to manage, how they deal with outside people and how they're going to deal with the inside people. And then one of the main characteristics that distinguishes the state from political smaller units, okay? And so we can see that smaller units are definitely going to be a singular rule. And then whenever you get bigger, it tends to be more of a democratic society because of the people's needs. And the last one is government. And so each state is politically organized, and then government itself is the agency that the state uses to accomplish the goals. So next question is, what is government itself? And so government is an institution which makes and enforces public policies. Now, within this, public policies include the defense, the crime, the education, healthcare, transportation, civil rights of the country. Okay, now it's not limited to these, but so it can expand upon them. So, what is the purpose of a government? So, the purpose of a government, for instance, of the United States, is to form a more perfect union, and so within that union, there is strength. And so it's also to guarantee civil rights and liberties within that country. There are natural rights that we talked about within citizenship. To promote the general welfare of citizens. Also, to establish justice. The law must be responsible, fair, and impartial. You can't see where the law favors one people over another. It must be blind to race, must be blind to gender, okay? To ensure domestic tranquility, which means that you're going to have a police force that is going to make sure that law is kept in our society, but also equally placed upon everybody. And to provide the common defense from outside attacks, so attacks from foreign entities within the world. So powers of the government. So what do they do? So for example, in the United States, we have a lawmaking branch with the legislative, and it has state legislatures as well. Then there's executive powers, which is the law enforcing, with U.S. President and the governor, and judicial is how it's going to be interpreted with the courts. So theories on how government began. So where did it come from? For centuries, political historians have theorized about the origin of state and government. But there have been four theories about the most commonly accepted explanations of government itself. So when we look at our historical records of the world, okay, we have to start looking at cultures and how these cultures helped to form the governments that took over. We can look at Greece and Rome about what happened with those cultures. And so one is by the force theory. So the government was created by force. So it means that there is a person or group that is going to come and gain control of the land itself. They're going to be the ones that are forcing a rule upon you. And the people that they're forcing are willing to submit to the rule of that person. So if I come in as a dictator or as a military leader and I take over a country, okay, I am gaining power by force. The people that I'm gaining power over must submit to it. Then there's the evolutionary theory, which is a primitive family where one person was the head of the group, and it's really what we see in our early cultures of our government. And so within this, there's typically tribal type views where there's a chieftain and it's inheritable power. But over time, this family does evolve, and it starts to clan together with other different clans, and then this clans turn into a tribe, and so we're gaining more people, we're gaining strength, but as we gain strength, you've got clans joining together with the heads of the lands of daughters and sons marrying each other to form a new bigger clan. And so after a while, this turns into where you've got this head person that has taken over all of the clans into one big tribe. And so when farming began, the tribe settled down and government began. So government really is not seen to take place until a nomadic civilization goes from the nomadic lifestyle to a settlement lifestyle where you can actually start to build upon, especially culture-wise. Then there's the divine right theory. Now, this is something that you'll see a lot in Europe. And basically what it is, it means, and even in China. But what it is where they say that God has given them the power to rule over that country. They're given the divine right by God to rule over that country. And so, because of this, the people that lived there were bound to obey the ruler because they believed God told them to do. Okay? And so you've got more than just force making them submit to the king, but also their religious background and so their religious views. And so you've got religion and force, okay, making the people submit to the king, a king or queen at that time. And then this last one is the social contract theory. And so that is more of what a democracy gets into. That's more of what we start looking at into our culture, and says, before the government, the strong took what they wanted with no authority to stop them. But what we figured out is that humans or people would deserve certain rights. And we started to think about, hey, I'm willing to give up certain rights for you to rule our country, but you can't infringe on our other rights. So we're exchanging a little bit of our rights to a ruling government to take over, to make sure that we are protected from some outside power, right, in exchange for protecting our natural rights. And so humans created government because they were tired of this unpleasant condition of being just overruled, and agreed to give up some power to the government in exchange for safety. So types of government. So there are four main types that we're going to look at. So the first ones that we look at, there's autocracies, oligarchies, unitary governments, federal governments, confederations, presidential governments, parliamentary governments. And so all these have different characteristics, but we're going to look at four of them. And so classifications of them are based upon participation, on who can participate in the government and who holds the power. Okay, like the power of Grayskull. Ah! No, okay, but so the power and the government. So is it the people or the authoritarian government? Then the geography of the area. So how does distribution of government and process actually work? And then is there an legislative or is there executive? So this relationship is a legislative body where it's lawmaking, and executive, it shouldn't be more powerful than the other. You shouldn't have an executive such as a king that can overrule the lawmaking branch without some kind of other check, like it is in America, where you've got legislative branch and executive branch. Both have power, and the executive branch can overrule the legislative branch, but the legislative branch can check the executive branch by overriding his veto, or having a veto override. Participation, we look at democracy. Okay, so within the democracy, political authority rests within the people. It is a government by the people for the people. This is very much what Americans are. Government is conducted only by the consent of the governed. So government gets their power from us. We consent to the federal government rule us, okay? And we consent by voting. That's how our consenting of our ruling power. Then we have direct democracy, which is the most purest form of democracy there is. It is where you will vote on everything, okay? And we can see early forms of direct democracy in America in the Mayflower Compact, or up in the New England area, where they have these town hall meetings that help rule the colony at the time. Okay, laws were brought up, and they voted as a group. Okay, and that was force of law. But everybody was involved, and not really works. I mean, only really works for small communities. That's why it worked up in the smaller colonies and in the New England area, because they were smaller at the time being. Then you have indirect democracy. Now, this is a representative democracy, where you vote for a person to represent you in a legislative arena that votes for you. Okay, and so we can look at old school ways at direct democracy and indirect democracy. With the direct democracy, it is Greece. Think of how small the country was. Okay, it was easy to get everybody together that were considered to be citizens at the time to vote. But indirect democracy emerges in Rome. So Rome looks to Greece and says, that is a good idea, but our country is so huge. How are we going to adapt it to Rome and our great empire? And so they said, we're going to create districts within our empire, and then we're going to elect people in those districts to represent us back in Rome. And so they create this representative democracy. Then dictatorship and the participation. In this, it is absolute and unchallenging authority over the people. That means that the ruling leader has no body against them. Okay, you can think of Stalin. Okay, he took over and he absolutely controls everything. They have no responsibility to the will of the people. The people can protest all they want, but he can say, I don't think so, and just have them all killed, murdered, or put into jail without second thought, because he does not care. All he cares about is staying in power and keeping his power. Then there's oligarchies. Okay, and government is which in the power of a small ruling group, usually self-appointed elite. You have an autocracy, ruled by one, and oligarchy ruled by many. Okay, and the aristocrats of the country, and so the ruling elite of that country. And with this, the geographic distribution of power, you have unitary governments, which were centralized governments. All power is held by a central agency. Okay, and this is where authoritarian governments lie into dictatorships and autocracies and oligarchies. They have power. Power is centralized within the government. It's not broken up into different groups. Then you have all powers held by a central agency. Central governments create local units. And then there's what we call a federation power. Within this federation of power, it is broken up between different levels of power. So if we look at the United States, for example, we're considered to be a federal government because we have the national level, then we have the state level, then we have the local level. And so all these are important to the culture itself. And then central and local governments have to agree to make changes within that federal government lifestyle. And so you have to have agreements from the different levels. Distribution of power in a confederation. In a confederation, agency of independent states. Its central organization only handles those matters, and member states assign it to, usually limited to defense and trade. The United States was originally a confederation. The Articles of Confederation, right after the Declaration of Independence was signed, it was a loose grouping of the country, and it really didn't work out because they couldn't really. There was no central power under the Articles of Confederation, and they had to all vote. They had to have 9 out of 13 colonies to agree to do anything, and he couldn't get it to work out. They couldn't they couldn't raise any money, especially after the American Revolution, and so they saw it was very limited in what it could do. Then you have legislative and executive presidential government, which your executive and legislatures are separate and independent from each other. There's the chief executive. The United States, it is a president. The president chosen independent of the legislature. President holds office for a fixed term. Okay, there's 4 years or 2 terms. Then has broad powers, not subject to control by legislative branch. So there's creating a division of power between lawmaking and execution of the law. Then there's parliamentary type government, which is executives made up of the prime minister or premier and official cabinet. And within the parliamentary system, the prime minister is actually still part of the legislative branch. There's no division between the executive and the legislative branch. The prime minister is elected from the majority party in the parliament. And so prime minister is a part of the majority party of the parliament, and it's subject to direct control by the parliamentary system. And so England is the greatest example of this that we should know about, where they have the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and then the Prime Minister, and actually the legislative branch or the legislator is what the Parliament system is what helps to influences our system with the Senate and the House of Representatives. So, what are the characteristics of democracy in America? You should understand what are the characteristics of democracy and why are they important, and what elements and conditions help to allow a democracy to flourish. So in democracy, the greatest thing that you can do is vote. Okay? A democracy is a governmental system in which the sovereign power rests with the people. And so in a democracy, the people elected representatives are responsible for answering to the popular will of the people. Government within the democracy system works to secure an equal opportunity for people to develop their own abilities. Government is based upon majority rule through the people elected representatives, but they have respect to the minority rights. And so if you remember back from when we were talking about the will of the people and and all that, is that there in a government there is the majority rule, but they has to have respect to the minority rights. So there's a balancing act, is that the majority can't get everything that they want. That it has to also have some kind of protections for the minority group, because if you don't have that, you're going to have an overruling power by one group, which is going to diminish the feelings or diminish the rights of the minorities. Then there's government is based upon free and open elections. Okay, that means that there isn't anything out there that is trying to bash or trying to stop elections. There's been periods within our own democracy that we see that this has happened, and we've tried to remedy this with amendments, trying to get rid of the poll tax, trying to get rid of the taking a test to vote. We've got rid of race as a means of keeping people from voting, and with the 19th Amendment, it allowed women the right to vote. And so we are reducing the restrictions on open elections in America. And so within this, every citizen has the right to vote. Every vote has equal weight, and candidates for office can freely express their views. Political parties choose candidates for office, respect the voters' decision in elections, and act as loyal oppositions. So elements of democracy. Certain conditions of environments favor the development of a democratic system of government. And so when we start talking about in America, we look at our original elected officials, not elected officials, but our founding fathers. We look back at how we were treated under the king, where we were allowed to flourish for so long of independence of Great Britain, but Great Britain decides to say, you know what, we need some money, and we've been protecting y'all, so you're going to start paying some taxes. But, as Americans, we felt our natural rights are being violated because we didn't have a right in Parliament to give our opinion, even though we were still British citizens, because we were British colonists. So we should have that right in the House of Commons to have representation, but we were denied that, so we felt infringed on. And so because of that environment, it helped to create this system of democratic government. And countries where citizens participate fully in civic life are more likely to maintain a strong democracy. That's why we have so many people talk about campaigning. Okay, we have election ads. It is trying to make you participate in a civic life. And then stable and growing economies with large middle classes help to strengthen this as well. Also, public school system is another element of democracy, where people are being educated about civics, about how to read, how to write, the basics to understand laws and rules in our society, because it helps to promote the idea of democracy, because knowledge is power. And people accept democratic values such as individual liberty and equality for all in a social consensus. And so another element of democracy is a network of volunteer organizations, such as economic groups, religious groups, and many others that help to do stuff in our communities. And these exist independent of our government and help to a democracy to flourish. And that ends our PowerPoint on types of government.